Hi, my name is Wanda Almodóvar. I am the IPM coordinator for Puerto Rico, and I am the director of the project Divided by Water, United by Need IPM programs for Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands, funded by the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture under the CPPM Extension Implementation Program. The Extension IPM programs in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands support the community and spread the word about safety and healthy foods through our extension outreach and training. We promote the implementation of IPM to increase secure food production. Information is shared between Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We use demonstrational projects in model farms, field days, and workshops as the main training settings and learning by doing. We believe that IPM practices to be effective require the integration of control methods, general farm management practices, and the knowledge of farmers and scientists. Our team worked in close collaboration to achieve our goals and increase the number of farmers and persons that learn about IPM. Amy Dribbs is the U.S. Virgin Islands IPM coordinator and have a subgrant to work in this project. Ada Alvarado is the IPM specialist, Daniel Rivera is the ornamental specialist, Marta Giraldo the plant pathologist, Eda Martinez entomology specialist, and Jaime Curbelo professor and extension dairyman in Puerto Rico. Our goals are to reduce human and environmental health risks, improving agricultural biosecurity, and to increase the number of farmers that adopt IPM practices in their crops through demonstration projects, field days, and diagnostic clinic support. In Puerto Rico and the United States Virgin Islands, pest and climatic conditions are challenges to producing quality food. We prioritize pest management needs, maintaining good communication with the extension agents, who help us in identifying pest problems in the field. Also, pest management needs are discussed in commodity and farmers' meetings. From these inputs, we decided what priority areas will be included in the project. Coordination and IPM committees are used to define IPM priorities and critical information needs in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We coordinate workshops to address emerging and new pest issues in crops, participate in IPM symposia in APSCD, presenting the role of the IPM program in Puerto Rico, and in other symposia like the root crops symposia in this activity. Also, we plan extension IPM outreach through the IPM committee and coordinate meetings with commodity leaders, farmers associations, and other agencies. We educate farmers and other clientele in formal and informal ways using IPM extension bulletins and pocket field guides, oral presentations, workshops, trainings, and demonstrational projects in model farms. We train agricultural agents in IPM technologies so they can provide timely and high-quality information and strategies to farmers to improve their ability to deal with pest problems. The information is given in a gradual way so that farmers can assimilate it better and apply practices in their farms. The evaluation of the activities is made using pre- and post-tests to help ensure impact and progress. We use the IPM website hosted in the Extension official webpage and the Facebook pages of the Puerto Rico Agricultural Extension Service and the UPRM Diagnostic Clinic to maintain farmers and the general public informed about IPM. Among the wide variety of root crops that frame the basic daily diet in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, sweet potato, yam, and tanier occupy an important place in our primary food source. As part of global climate change and hurricane seasons, it's imperative to the Caribbean and Puerto Rico to strengthen our food security sources. This is one of the objectives of the specialty crops area of emphasis, IPM in roots and tubers in Puerto Rico. In IPM in roots and tubers, the objectives are to improve yield and marketable quality in farms, increase awareness and consumption among youth and adults, develop pocket guides and comic booklets, and launch an island-wide educational campaign in collaboration with extension agents presenting these crops as the superfoods of the Caribbean. The educational campaign has been a success throughout the island of Puerto Rico. More than 500 persons, including students of elementary schools and community participants, acquired knowledge about the importance of root crops in food security. Participants increased their knowledge in the identification of common pests, IPM practices, and nutritional properties of root crops. In the sweet potato comic, IPM practices are explained in a simpler way than in the guide. Each character introduces itself by its cultivar name and shares its powers, nutritional and functional properties. The sweet potato guide was translated to English and French and is available at the IPM website. A pocket guide was also produced for Tanier. As in sweet potato, the IPM practices are explained in a simpler way than in the guide, and the characters were designed to motivate youth to learn about the crop in a fun way. The Tanier guide was translated to English and is available at the IPM website also. The Jam Pocket Guide, as the Sweet Potato and Tanier guides, contains information about the crop and its integrated management to increase quality and local production. The guide and comic booklets are available in Spanish and will be available soon in English, and will be in the IPM website. The educational campaign was conducted among elemental schools, 4-H youth, and communities, with the support of the extension agents. Field days were conducted in different locations throughout Puerto Rico, focusing on providing knowledge and skills to youth, leaders, and parents to help them understand the importance of root crops as superfoods and resilient crops. Topics included production in vegetable gardens and farms, IPM, nutritional value, and recipes to promote their consumption. The field days used a hands-on approach with small group discussions and demonstrations to teach key concepts. Results of the project were presented in the Farinaceous Crops Commodity Meeting. Also, the campaign covered a large part of the island, including the areas of greatest root crops production. The trainings and educational materials were shared with the United States Virgin Islands personnel in a conference and in visits to farmers in St. Croix. The establishment of the campaign as part of the plan of work of extension agents assured that it is implemented as part of the regular curriculum and activities. There was an increase in the number of elemental schools that receive education on root crops. Around 15 to 20 elemental schools in Puerto Rico were part of the educational campaign. Also, field days and visits of extension agents to root and tuber crops farmers reported an increase of 50% in the number of growers that implemented at least 3 IPM practices in their farms, including the use of clean seed, weed control, and pest and disease monitoring. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands depend on imported grains and local forage production. Forage production for livestock is becoming more relevant due to the sustained increase of grain prices. Forage production in the tropic faces many obstacles that affect its production efficiency, including invasive pests and weeds. Therefore, the priority IPM implementation in animal agriculture for forage crops destined to feed livestock addresses strategies that help farmers to manage in a better way these challenges. The objectives of this area are to train personnel on dynamic educational tools to improve audience engagement during educational activities, improving evaluation of our programs, the assessment of the most common invasive weeds and insects that affect tropical and subtropical forages in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and develop an integrated pest management manual and pocketbook for the control of invasive pests that affect tropical and subtropical forages. In technologies to improve audience engagement, the project participants received the VBox workshop and used it in trainings to extension agents. 13 extension agents in the north central part of the island of Puerto Rico were trained about IPM in dairy farms, and 45 extension agents were trained about the benefits of pollinators. During these trainings, 68 extension agents used VBox to train their audience, reporting that 92% felt more comfortable using new technologies to enhance audience engagement and learning experience. They observed 80% improvement in audience attention span and an increase of 86% in adoption of recommended practices in their clientele. A graduate student, Gloria Alice Gonzalez, made her thesis on the evaluation of forest biomass using multispectral images collected with unmanned aerial vehicles and its relationship with IPM. Using the drone deploy software, geoposition points were defined on the maps corresponding to the targeted dairy farms. At each imaging point, actual biomass samples were collected and then compared with the multispectral images to determine their relationship and validate the accuracy of the imaging data in estimating biomass. At each sampling point, evaluation of the botanical composition of weeds, insects, and forages were performed. A total of 42 plant species were identified, of which 4, Rhynchospora nervosa, Mimosa pudica, Sporobolus indicus, and Cynodon niemfuensis, showed significant differences between dairy farms categorized as excellent and poor. In the dairy farms categorized as excellent, a lower frequency of weeds was observed, attributable to agricultural practices such as livestock rotation, weed control, and fertilization, which promote a dense forage cover. In the dairy farms categorized as poor, weed species such as Rhynchospora nervosa and Mimosa pudica predominated, suggesting poor management characterized by overgrazing. Extension agents and forage and livestock producers were trained. Results of this study was presented in various forums to increase knowledge on IPM in forages. Forage management and IPM practices from dairy farms with excellent forage quality and abundance destined for grazing were collected and presented to extension agents. This information is being used to assist farmers dealing with poor forage quality and abundance. A workshop was conducted for agricultural agents to address the impact of weeds on grazing lands and the efficient management of tropical forages to maximize forage biomass production. The workshop made emphasis in strategies for proper grazing, land management, and the importance of weed control to improve resilience and productivity. Management alternatives adapted to tropical conditions, focusing on suitable forage species for arid areas, were discussed. The workshop also included a section on the innovative use of drones in agricultural applications, emphasizing the use of multispectral cameras to assess forage health. These technologies enable precise and early monitoring of pasture conditions, facilitating informed and effective decisions in agricultural management. Field training was also offered to undergraduate students about the use of drones to evaluate weed management in forage for livestock feeding. In St. Croix, farmers were trained about the benefits of intensive rotational grazing to improve forage production and control weeds, desirable pasture species to be adapted on grassland, and the importance of weed control on pastures. This effort helped us to increase IPM efforts in the Caribbean related to forage production and weed control. A pilot project for farmers was established in a successful farm in St. Croix. A total of 25 participants were benefited from this educational effort. Field trainings also gave emphasis to grassland management and forage production for beef cattle and goats. As a result of these efforts in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, extension agents, forage producers, and livestock producers increased their knowledge on IPM in forages. A A pocket guide about common weeds in dairy farms and an educational video about intensive grazing for weed management were produced. This pocket guide in Spanish and English and the educational video will be extremely helpful to help farmers to begin adopting new IPM practices in forages. In IPM implementation in specialty crops, we are going to work with ornamentals and vegetables. Over the past 25 years, ornamental plants have been among the top 5 crops in agricultural income across Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. There are about 303 farms dedicated to nursery, greenhouse crops, and floriculture in Puerto Rico, and about 415 farms dedicated to different crops and ornamentals in the U.S. Virgin Islands. It is imperative that we protect our natural resources and beneficial organisms and strengthen food security and profitability. This priority area covers ornamental and vegetables, whitefly IPM in Puerto Rico, and IPM of Solanaceae and Cucurbitaceae grown on farms and gardens. The objectives are identification of whitefly biotypes associated with poinsettias and vegetables in greenhouses, the creation of protocols on BMPs and IPM practices for whiteflies, updating the IPM, BMP, and poinsettia manual for floriculture, greenhouse, and vegetable growers, and training and assistance of farmers, agricultural agents, and other stakeholders in IPMs and BMPs. Also develop pocket guides, training, and field guides for key pests of Solanaceae and Cucurbitaceae crops. Samples were sent to the U.S. Horticultural Research Laboratory of ARS USDA at Florida and were identified to biotype level by Dr. Cindy McKenzie, research entomologist. 171 samples were identified. Bemisia tabasi biotype B and Q. Biotype Q is informed for the first time in Puerto Rico, posing a major threat to ornamental and vegetable growers in Puerto Rico. Publications produced and distributed include survey data sheet, pesticide application, and IPM and BMP checklist. That includes a list of practices recommended for greenhouse production and whitefly management in greenhouses. These publications will help farmers to keep a record of practices implemented in their nurseries to guide management decisions. Whitefly IPM include information on which biotype have been detected in poinsettia production, IPM practices including prevention, distance between pods, how to survey whiteflies, cultural practices, biological control, chemical control, and their compatibility with natural enemies and pesticide rotation. The publications, including protocols, survey data sheet, and checklist for whiteflies IPM, are available at the IPM website. The publications are in the process of translation to English. This information is being added to the BMP and IPM poinsettia manual, and the new version will be available on August 31, 2024. 7 workshops to 64 growers, 3 agricultural agents that work with ornamentals, and 10 nursery workers in Puerto Rico, and 10 workers and 1 workshop to growers and agricultural agents in the Virgin Islands, with a total of 128 participants that acquire knowledge in whitefly IPM and BMPs. In outcomes, 2 ornamental nurseries were used as model nurseries. The producers of these model nurseries adopted 8 IPM practices, including cultural practices and safe pesticide use. These growers produce ornamental plants to disseminate to different parts of the island, and they train their employees in best management practices and IPM. Through visits to the model nurseries and trainings, knowledge of participants in whiteflies IPM and BMPs was increased. Also, the number of growers that obtained knowledge in IPM and BMP increased by 50%. The results of these priority areas are available in the IPM website and also was presented in the Society of the Puerto Rican Agricultural Sciences. In IPM implementation in specialty crops, with emphasis on key pests on diseases of Solanaceae and Cucurbitaceae crops. Key pests have been identified in Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. 2 pocket guides in English and Spanish were developed and are in peer review. Also, presentations, field trips, workshops, and trainings have been developed. In IPM implementation in communities, the objectives are to gather information about all common ornamental plants in production in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Prepare educational materials in Spanish and English about IPM and best management practices for the clientele. Teach the communities practices to preserve natural enemies and pollinators, and measure the increase of knowledge in IPM and BMPs using the Stairway to Sustainability and Stewardship rating model. A list of ornamental plants that attract pollinators is currently available on the Puerto Rico IPM webpage as part of the outputs of this priority area. Also, a field pocket guide showcasing beneficial organisms and pollinators associated with the flowering plants is in process. Dr. Dania Rivera, Amy Drips, and Wanda Almodóvar presented a poster about plants for pollinators and natural enemies in Puerto Rico in the Puerto Rican Society of Agriculture, and also integrated pest management in the United States Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico backyard communities. A guide about plant care and identification of common seasonal flowering plants, including ornamentals, annuals, shrubs, palms, trees, and managed weeds and vines grown in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, was produced in Spanish and English. Each plant has the common name, scientific name, and other important information, also pictures to help identification and proper care. The education of the community during pollinator festivals and other activities in Puerto Rico. Over 300 backyard gardeners impacted in Puerto Rico directly. 4-H leaders, agricultural agents, and educators in family and consumer sciences in Puerto Rico had used the publications and materials for their community activities in Puerto Rico. Increased access of the public to ornamental plants education with publications and presentations are some of the outcomes of this priority area. In IPM for pollinators, the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico gardeners and farmers will have help in distinguishing pests from beneficial organisms, such as the variety of pollinators and natural enemies that live among us. They lack the knowledge to build healthy, safe, and sustainable habitat that will minimize pests and preserve the pollinators. Conservation of these natural resources and preservation of pollinators are essential to food production and are not well understood by the people of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. The objectives of this priority area are to develop fact sheets and PowerPoints to support the lessons and activities of the Pollinator Curricular Guide. Train the Trainer program for extension faculty and master gardeners in the Pollinator Curricular Guide, and promote the establishment of pollinator gardens and areas in farms to support pollinators through trainings to farmers and backyard gardeners and activities in the demonstrational pollinator gardens. The outputs of this area are around 30 plant nurseries were visited in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands to familiarize producers with ornamental plants that support pollinators and use of IPM to manage pests. Approximately 25 native and naturalized plants were identified in visited nurseries and UPR pollinator gardens that attract a variety of pollinators. 6 workshops about pollinator protection and pest monitoring, identification on IPM, and plants that attract pollinators were presented to more than 200 participants in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. 8 fact sheets were prepared to support the activities of the Pollinator Curricular Guide. 6 pollinator festivals were celebrated from 2021 to 2024 in both islands with collaboration of different agencies related to pollinator protection, with participation of more than 300 persons per activity. Extension publications that were generated in this area were educational posters about pollination and the flower, Know Your Pollinators, Passport to the Garden coloring book, and many other publications that are available in the IPM website. In the outcomes, there was an increased number of farmers, youth, and families that understand key factors affecting pollinators and how to protect them. Also, improved understanding of pollinator protection in the community after the implementation of model pollinator gardens. Increased use of IPM practices both in gardens, orchards, and farms to protect pollinators, and more people are using ornamental plants and herbs that attract pollinators in their backyard gardens. In IPM for pest diagnostic facilities, the objectives are the coordination with the extension agricultural agents of the identifications of farmers' diagnostic needs, the early detection of diseases and pests in farms, and the training of farmers on the identification of unavailable IPM practices. We make use of field days to train farmers on key pest identification and biosecurity, and exhibitions and other presentations of the diagnostic clinic in the commodity meetings, where farmers go to express their IPM needs. There is also a pocket guide that is going to be available in the IPM website. As outputs, a committee was created to address the emergency of the coffee fruit rot disease in farms. A workshop was made for coffee farmers, and 200 farmers attended and learned about coffee fruit rot integrated management. Four publications were made about coffee fruit rot, registered fungicides, IPM plan for coffee, and also a video to help in the educational effort. The UPR Mayagüez Campus Diagnostic Clinic and the Phytopathology and Tissue Culture Laboratory in the Rio Piedras Experimental Station are collaborating to help farmers reduce crop losses by accurately diagnosing plant health problems and making reliable recommendations. During this project, around 300 farmers has been trained in biosafety practices they should implement in their farms, identification of key pests and diseases, prevention, and available management practices. The diagnostic clinic team developed different activities throughout the island to give advice to the general public in pest identification and prevention, management tactics, promote other activities and ongoing projects to involve farmers, backyard gardeners, and students. Every year, integrated pest management field days are held by the IPM staff and the agricultural agents to help growers make decisions on managing their crops. These field days allows Puerto Rico Extension to get information to the growers and guide them in making key decisions about implementing IPM practices. Scientists and researchers are typically asked to present information and research to help growers understand the importance of IPM practices. The IPM personnel working in the clinics develop fact sheets and other publications for farmers. This information is very valuable and helps farmers in the early diagnosis of pests so they can implement control practices to maintain plants healthy. We also have the Facebook page of the diagnostic clinic to help farmers, ornamental producers, and other public to recognize pests and diseases in different crops. We post publications about identification and management of key pests and go live to broadcast virtual events about IPM ongoing projects. I want to acknowledge USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture for the support of this project, and also I want to emphasize the importance of the IPM issues in the Southern region and Caribbean. This Issues were addressed to help in the ongoing recovery and rebuilding of the local agricultural industry following the impact of hurricanes in our area. This project's motto was identify, inform, engage, empowered, awaken. We promoted the implementation of IPM and BMPs on the islands with the goal of increasing food quality and security in the region. Thank you for your attention.